Testing. Secure your Elixir apps with Paraxial.io. From code analysis and bot defense to dependency checks, they've got you covered. Elixir first design with GitHub integration. Elevate your security at Paraxial.io. What's up? I'm Jacob Litzo, your Elixir mentor, and welcome to another exciting episode of the Elixir Mentor podcast. This is where we discuss everything related to Elixir, from interviews with enthusiasts, pioneers in the community, to innovative projects and libraries shaping Elixir's future. Today, I'm joined with Christopher Grainger, creator of Amplified.ai, who's bringing LangGraph functionality to Elixir for powerful and genetic workflows. Why did I just do that? Because I'm live. But Chris, you can correct me. And why don't you give a brief introduction of yourself and what you're doing?
Yeah, so it's Amplified.ai. That's my first correction. Just to
Oh, what
throw
did
out
I
there.
say?
You got me as IO, but it's one of
Oh,
those
okay.
TLDs,
Yeah.
that one of the fancy TLDs, right?
I'm just
Yeah,
butchering
and
everything
so
in my intro.
I will butcher plenty. Don't worry. I have been working with Elixir for I guess it's about 5 years now. I don't know what year it is anymore. And Amplified's been around for about 7. So we made a transition to Elixir pretty early on. We made a transition to kind of go one step in terms of consolidating our web application from an Elixir backend and a React front end to live view, and that was back in 2020. Then in 2022 we made a transition from like all of our Pythonic stuff, all of our Python AI stuff, a bunch of big ETL stuff. We transitioned that all to Elixir. And yeah, I think as the times are changing, things are becoming much more LLM based, generative workflows, agentic workflows, that sort of thing. And Elixir is really, really well poised, I think, to. I've lost connection, and there I'm back, I think.
Oh, are you still here? Oh no,
Let's check.
we lost Chris. We'll give him a second to join
Mm,
back up.
How's that?
And he's back.
I apologize. I have changed internet connection, and hopefully that will see us through. So where was I, if anywhere, when I dropped off?
I think it was times are changing and we're starting to see LLMs enter our workflows quite a bit more.
Yeah, no, that's pretty much where I lost things too. Yeah, so yeah, the times they are changing. We're seeing a lot more in terms of LLMs, and what LLMs can bring to web development, SaaS, all sorts of, I mean, everything, right? And I think Elixir is particularly well suited and particularly well positioned to be a powerful player. Python owns everything. Everybody uses Python for everything. But there are some fundamentals to Elixir, particularly, OTP gives us a lot. And I think that Elixir is really well situated for agentic workflows in particular, and chaining together LLMs, doing all that kind of good stuff. So that's kind of where my brain has been recently, and something that I've just kind of started working on.
Nice, that's cool. I'm kind of excited. I like briefly was chatting with ChatGPT like to help me like architect a project idea, and it actually suggested Elixir. And I was like, that's I wonder if it's because of my profile or if Elixir's getting a little more well known in like LLM space and stuff.
Yeah, entirely possible. And it may just be it's getting fed a bunch of stuff from, Hacker News, and everybody loves Elixir on Hacker News, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. Why don't we start off with LangGraph? Like, why did that become a project? Why is that something you're working on? And yeah, why are
Yeah.
you why are you working on it?
Yeah, so still really early days. There's nothing open yet. Not sharing anything, but we're starting to dog food some things at Amplified and starting to work on that. Um, there's already LangChain. in Elixir. We talked a little bit before the show about that. Mark Erickson has been working on that and doing some really excellent work. LangChain, the idea there is, I think, to make things a bit simpler, a bit easier to bring together some of the more powerful workflows that you can get with LLMs. So, it's this is kind of a major crux of the limits to what AI can do, right? Or it's related to the limits of what AI can do. I think if you just go and you ask AI something, if you're chatting with ChatGPT or what have you, it's going to come back with sometimes really great results, sometimes really like flabbergastingly great results, but often it's going to require a little bit of back and forth. It might require putting some constraints on things. And so the premise behind LangChain is both in terms of making it easier to get started, as well as easier to do exactly that, chain those calls together. So the LLM is a lot better if you can automate some of that back and forth if you're trying to achieve a task. So you might ask it one thing, and then you might chain a call that says, now based on that response that you got back, refine it in this way.
Mm.
And just doing that in separate steps can lead to significantly better results. You can say, hey, can you correct this answer that I got back already? Kind of like, the classic thing about how do you get an answer on the internet? It's put up, the wrong answer and somebody's going to correct you. Um, so LangChain gives you that. It also gives you tool use, which with LLMs, what that means is you can define a function by its parameters effectively. You can document those parameters, and then you can provide that as a tool for the AI to use. So it can make a choice when it comes back. It can say, I've given you an answer, or I'd like to use one of these tools that you've offered me so that I can get some more context, a little bit more information, or I might want to do something like use a calculator. And so LangChain gives you that, right? And that's so to back up just a tiny bit with that, LangChain is based on a library in Python, which is significantly larger. It tries to bring in the whole kitchen sink with everything, right? That the same people who made LangChain also made a library called LangGraph, and this is a little bit of a simpler concept in terms of what it brings, right? It doesn't have to bring the whole kitchen sink, but it's more about orchestrating the workflows. So LangGraph takes that idea of chaining and moves it on into exactly what it sounds like. It moves it into graphs where you can start to do things like you can cycle, right? You can make decisions about what step you should do next. So one of the concepts there is like a router, right? And you might ask the AI based on the context that you have and the information that you have, what's the next step that I should take? You might want to do things, patterns like fan out, fan in. You might want to give you an example for something like that. You've got what's called you've got a chain of thought prompting where you say, hey, give me your reasoning as well as your final result. And we've seen really, really big improvements in the outputs from LLMs when you prompt it that way. One of the things that you can actually do is you can get, let's say, like 4 or 5 to all reason, and then you can choose the best chain of reasoning and then get the final answer from that. So you can do these kind of like forking, all this sort of stuff. And so I feel like that's something that we're missing in the Elixir community right now. There's a little bit more to it as well. I have some opinions about how pluggable it should be, and just the ability to take advantage of some of the primitives that we have, like behaviors, to define really nice contracts, and produce this kind of very highly modular approach. Um, and and then bring that in with agents and these agentic and graph-based workflows. So that's where I think that we're really missing the kind of functionality that you can get with Python. But it's also, I think, where Elixir is poised to shine. I don't know if you're aware of Microsoft's AutoGen, but they spend a bunch of time and effort to basically replicate actor-based concurrency because that's what they needed for agentic workflows.
Mhm. And then out of the box with Elixir, we have just processes that we can run, right? which is,
Exactly.
it kind of
And so
seems like
that's
it
that's
fits
the next step.
perfect. Yeah.
No, it does, exactly. So that's kind of the next step. So graphs give you all of that, and that's really, really powerful. And then there are agents, right? And the agents are things that need to run independently. They might run for a long time. They might need to be able to access memory. They might need to be able to receive messages or send messages or communicate and organize. And that's where you have these OTP primitives. We can just talk about them as gen servers, right? And if you've got this kind of structured contract of how you're defining these gen servers and giving them things like tools, giving them things like graph workflows that they can run, giving them the the knowledge of, for example, our project process registry. We can tell it, we can say, hey, we know that these are also running, these processes are running. We know that they're at these PIDs, and we can send messages to them and get responses back. And they might retain memory of that conversation. They might retain or they might actually go off and do something else. We've got this really powerful kind of primitive and paradigm that we're able to just bring directly to the concept of LLM agents.
That's really cool. So you're basically an agent is a gen server that's holding state. It's your stateful process and can do whatever you want in the process of your LLM work or prompting. And what you're saying is, sorry, I think my mic's a little far away. Like we've all played around on ChatGPT. For people that aren't like super involved in working on LLM projects or machine learning projects on their day to day, which we talked about, I feel like I fall behind not doing it. But you need to break down steps. You can't ever tell Claude to write you a full blown app, right? You have to be like, I need this function. It needs to do this. My output should be this. And it will usually do a good job with its baby steps, right? And
Yeah.
so agents are the automated version of me making small prompts, essentially.
Yeah, basically, they've got these kind of like, you can give them goals effectively, and you can get this kind of back and forth and chaining going on, and they can make a decision. Is this good enough? Do I need to? Am I ready to start working on the next thing? They can hold things in memory, as you mentioned, so that's not just in the process memory. They can also, one of the behaviors that I'm defining is a memory module that can be ecto, it can be elasticsearch, it can be ets, it can be whatever. But they can make decisions like, when you are chatting back and forth with with AI, right? There's a conversation and there's a history of those messages, right? But the agents, they can choose, is this, and that, you think about that as your working memory. The agents can choose, is this something that should be in working memory, or is it something that I should actually hold on to for later? So maybe I retain, a key value store somewhere where I've got things that I can look up, or I can access particular databases, what have you. Yeah.
Yeah, all right, that's really cool. How are you implementing it in like amplitude? What Well, actually, why don't we start with what is amplitude and what do you do there?
Amplified
Oh my
is
gosh.
it's cool. It's cool. No, don't worry. It's yeah. It So Amplified is basically it's an AI powered knowledge management platform for intellectual property. I say basically at the start of that, and there's a whole bunch of words in there that all are doing a bunch of work. But it basically comes from some a meeting of minds with a friend of a friend who was working in intellectual property, um, and I was working on a PhD in innovation economics, and this is back in like 2013, 2014 when I was doing that, trying to figure out ways of doing effectively what we all know now as vector search, doing like document embeddings, but pretty early days, right? So I was working on climate policy and trying to understand the ways in which like climate change policy can affect the rate and direction of innovation. And in order to do that, I wanted to pull the much more like nuanced information that was in patents to do econometric models. Um, Most of the people who were doing this sort of work were using the classification codes on patents and stuff like that. And I saw an opportunity to use some of the emerging stuff. Like at that point, it was like Word to Vec, Doc to Vec. There were different kinds of models that are very that seem very old fashioned compared to what we have now. But the premise was to get this dense vector to represent a patent and then use that in the econometric models. Turns out that if you can get a dense vector of of something, then it's really good for retrieval. And we've all learned that lesson now. It's very, very common. But pretty early days with that. And so I founded Amplified with Sam, it's the guy I mentioned before, in order to solve problems around basically information retrieval in patent with patents. So um, started off with the idea that you know there are a bunch of bad patents that are being granted, and part of that is just that it's really difficult to find the relevant prior art, which is anything that exists, any patent that exists for a given invention.
Hmm.
And so we really wanted to democratize that and make it easy to find, reduce some of this waste. And so we tried to, build this kind of search platform. And then from there, we started, attending to different needs and realizing that the value can be relatively earlier in the chain, and can work towards the democratization aspect that I mentioned, getting it in the hands of like R&D users, and allowing them to start collaborating with their IP team directly there, like on the patents, with the patents, actually doing things that don't require them to be IP experts.
Yeah. Well, and
Um,
patent searching manually it's hard.
it is, and there's a lot that goes into it, right? So um, the people who are writing the patents, particularly the lawyers, they're trying to do so in a way that actually makes it hard to find.
Hmm.
So the basic premise of a patent, the social premise, right, is that you share what it is that you've invented, so that and then in return you get a monopoly over it. And the idea is that there's a social value to sharing that because it allows other people to take advantage of the innovations that you've made, as long as they're not infringing, or they may pay whatever. What ends up happening is that companies try to make it really, really difficult to find their patents because they want the monopoly protection, but they don't want to share the innovations that
Mm.
they've been making. Um, and so they purposefully write things that won't be found with like keyword search. They try to obfuscate their like application, or the assignee names, all that sort of stuff. And so that having this more like semantic approach where we get a dense embedding, a vector representation of a patent, kind of, we saw that as an opportunity to solve that problem, or to improve the ability to retrieve things based on the semantic meaning rather than on the content of the particular keywords and things like that.
Nice. In a different life, I actually considered going to law school to be a patent attorney. And
Oh,
then
really?
and then I went the software route because I was like, I don't like reading that much.
Yeah, fair. I like it seems like very, very difficult work, and honestly, sorry to any patent attorneys out there, very tedious work, like
Yeah.
extremely tedious work. There's
Hmm.
a lot of like poring over very specific words, when you're talking about like the claims for a patent. If you ever read the claims for a patent, man, that is some language.
Right. I don't even know if there's enough caffeine to keep me awake to read patents all day.
No, I look at it immediately, fall asleep. It's dangerous. I'll be programming, I'll be working on the SaaS app, and all of a sudden I'll flip over to a patent and I'm asleep.
I feel like Amplified is like such a great product. It just
Thank you.
from the aspect of being able to find things quickly and to even know if you're infringing on anything with what you're building.
Yeah, that's kind of, the push that we've been making recently, and where we've seen a ton of value come out, is with R&D teams, right? And knowing
Hmm.
early whether the idea that you have is worth pursuing, because that's where, you lose. millions of dollars when if you start out on something, you say, okay, this seems like a promising path of research. We're going to dump the R&D budget into it, and R&D budgets are huge, right? On top of that, your IP budgets are really tiny, so you've only got a few people who are working in IP, and they're getting all these requests from all the different R&D folks, and they're really overrun and all of that. Um, and yeah, we've been able to kind of build a lot of collaboration features, just a whole bunch of stuff to make that process easier for people.
Now, are you internally using your LangGraph library, or is it a work in progress? Anything implemented on that end yet?
We've started using it for structured outputs.
Okay.
So there's there's a library already out there called Instructor, which is awesome.
Mm-hmm.
It's really, really good. It uses Ecto. I wanted to go a slightly lighter weight route for that. One of the things about using Ecto and these schemas is that you have to do it at compile time.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas the approach that I've taken with this library is to use nimble options and convert nimble options into JSON schema, because JSON schema is what structured outputs from like OpenAI and Azure and all those use. It's also what Anthropic expects. So and I wanted to be able to define them dynamically, like kind of just as as things come in. Certainly, we can define modules and stuff, but it just was a little bit more straightforward. There's some issues. I don't know. Actually, I think that they may have been addressed in the most recent version of Instructor, but some issues with when you document a a schema, those documents, unless you say don't strip any of my documents or don't strip these particular modules in your mix.exs, you end up stripping away the documentation, and that can be a problem when you're trying to prompt using the documentation for each field. So I found that this approach using nimble options and using and converting it to JSON schema was a little bit more lightweight, a little bit simpler. We've started using it for we've got a feature where we call it Ask Amplified, basically where it allows you to define a question or a prompt, and you're going to run it across n different patents, right? You want to ask this question across a whole bunch of different patents. Um, and one of the things that we wanted to enable was the ability to get back something like a Boolean or an extracted number or something along those lines, to then allow you to filter or sort that set based on what the AI has returned. So we're using structured outputs for that, and just literally just a few days ago implemented that.
How does that work? Does the person submitting the questions like designate what they want the output to be, like, or
Exactly.
okay, cool.
So right now it's as simple as, a Boolean. You choose whether you want to have a Boolean response or a numerical response. Working actually on, and this kind of goes back to what I was saying about dynamic schemas before. We're working on the ability for the user to define an output schema within the app as well. So build up, I want it to respond with this, and this, and this is the documentation and things like
How
that.
are you handling that for persisting data with a dynamic schema? Like, I'd be curious. Is it just an embedded JSON at that point?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's
Okay.
exactly right.
Okay, cool. Very cool.
Yeah.
All right, nice. That's interesting. How do you so like if you have dynamic schemas everywhere, I'm guessing like every response then potentially just has a different schema, or are there things that always have to be there?
So it depends. In the case of what we have right now, where we're allowing users to just choose between like a Boolean or a numeric response, it's just, you have answer, and then actually we're using chain of thought, and a little bit of a tweak on chain of thought, where we're getting back the answer, we're getting back the reasoning steps, and we're actually getting back like a short canned explanation from the AI as well. We found that really, really useful for our customers. If they get like a yes no, they want to know why, like, based on reading this entire patent, why did you give me a yes no on this question here?
Mm.
um yeah, but yeah, no, like, so a particular question will be associated with a particular output structure, and just save that just based on the structure of what they've saved there.
Okay. So you're just saving basically a block of text, and then you're querying an embedded JSON for data.
Yep.
So, yeah. All right. Cool.
Yep.
Simple enough. I like that approach because I mean I feel like it's going against everything you learn with like relational databases, but it's
This is, there's not much reason that we have right now to do things like joins and things like that,
mm,
with the data that's coming back here. Maybe that'll change in the future, but also Postgres is really good about JSON B. So,
yeah, yeah.
you know,
Well, and really, all you're doing with your data is it needs to make sense to someone who's reading it, right? Like,
that's exactly right.
so
Yeah.
you just need to be able to query things and return readable prompts or values to people.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. So we've got the answer, right? Which in this case right now we've got, like I said, Boolean or numeric. Um, but if you define your own schema, that's going to be keyed with that answer there. So we're always really going to have answer, reasoning, and explanation, uh, at the top level. And then whatever the answer might be a struct, or it might be a single, like a single value.
Cool. That, yeah, this stuff is wild to me. But it's cool. I'm excited to see like I started recently attending a local Elixir meetup here, and it's nice
Mhm.
cuz it's in person, and you start seeing people in person again, and
Yeah.
be able to talk shop with people. And we were actually just discussing like the generic LLMs, like your Chat GPTs, your Claudes, and all those. And I feel like there's going to be a ceiling that we hit with things like that. But then
Mhm.
all these like niche LLM use cases, like we're going to start seeing a lot of companies, like Amplified, you're going to have your own LLM that's so specialized in patents and patent lookup that you're not going to need these giant LLM models out there for being able to answer just any question thrown at it.
Yeah, I actually think, like, this is kind of the thing about the agents and the approach here. Yeah, certainly. Fine-tuning smaller models definitely makes sense. I think fine-tuning smaller models for specific tasks generally is a pretty good approach. Um, there there's an approach that's come out of Stanford, and I'm blanking on the name of the library right now, where basically they actually are fine-tuning prompts rather than fine-tuning the models, and optimizing the prompt based on
Interesting.
some synthetic data and stuff like that.
Is it few
So there's some
shot
cool stuff.
prompt?
Uh, no, well, maybe. I can tell you really quickly. In fact, I can use the computer to tell you really quickly.
Natural language
Um,
processing with deep learning, prompting, and
it's
this
it's
is
DSpy.
DSpy.
That's the name of the
Okay.
framework.
Yep, there it is. Cool.
Yeah. So their whole premise is you get some training data effectively, right? You can do synthetic data as well that you're happy with. And then it will optimize the actual prompt based on interaction with an LLM, which I think is pretty incredible and pretty powerful. It does mean that you have to do some training before you actually deploy the prompts. But it ends up being a bit more cost effective. It ends up being a bit more transparent, that sort of thing. But to come back to your original point, I haven't had a reason yet to fine tune a model, and I question the direction of fine tuning them. And I think that the power, the place where we're going to start to see a lot of improvement is around these agentic workflows. It's around the orchestration. Like I mentioned earlier on, I think, you ask a really powerful LLM for an answer, and fantastic, you might get a good answer back, you might not. You
Right.
can actually ask, much smaller, much, less intelligent LLMs for questions, and then pass it around a few times. And even within that, that set of interactions, it might be faster, it might be cheaper, and you'll get a better response. So I think that, yeah, maybe, we're moving towards fine tuning specialized models, but I think particularly we're going to move towards orchestration of models, and self-support of models to get really good outcomes.
Yeah, I love hearing your take on it because, like, obviously, I'm coming from like a very general point of view, but when you hear about like Google, Chat GPT, and all these companies wanting to like build nuclear power plants just to support everything that they're doing, that's why like
Yeah,
I see the limit in these general purpose LLMs, right? Because is that
absolutely.
sustainable?
Yeah, no, we don't have an alternative approach to building LLMs. We're kind of running out of ideas in terms of how we can pack more information into the size of the model, and we're already up against, a bunch of constraints about like model size, and what that implies for, as you said, energy use, water use, and what it implies for, just things like the memory overhead of getting a response, right? Um, so yeah, I think that we're running up against that cap, and I think that that's why you saw this massive, exciting change from, like, you had GPT 2, and then GPT 3, and then 3.5, and then 4, and then 4.0. And if you notice, like, 4.0, things have kind of stopped after 4.0, and now we've started to see the rise of reasoning models, which are slightly different. They're basically doing this sort of like orchestration internally. It's actually reinforcement learning, but they're doing this kind of reasoning internally, the same kind of reasoning that you think about with like chain of thought. It's a little bit more complex than that, and that's why you see something like deep research that's coming out, where they're starting to put these things together. That's an agentic workflow, right?
Mhm.
Deep research is literally, those are agents coming together, and that's kind of where I think the best opportunities for gains and improvement and gains in intelligence for these models is going to be. I just, we don't have anywhere else to go in terms of architecting the model, in terms of architecting the LLM. And as you said, we're spending a ton on energy and water. Although, even if we make them more efficient, Jevons paradox is, I don't know if you know the Jevons paradox, but it's 19th century. It basically said, we can make things more efficient when we're burning coal, and actually, in doing so, you induce demand, it drops the price, and you actually, on in the aggregate, you do more, you use more coal, right?
Mhm.
So
Yeah,
even
that
if we
makes.
make the models more efficient, we're going to end up using more energy. But yeah,
Well, it's with any, big technology leap, right? Like it's fun and exciting at the beginning and only the diehards use it, but then it becomes mainstream.
definitely.
Yeah.
And the hope, I guess, is that, we get enough value, or there's enough application, and we get enough, intelligence and all of that from these models as they become more efficient, that they justify the increased energy and water use. But we shall see.
Yeah. I don't know. It's interesting. And like I always used to kind of just like be against what, well, one, I don't think like AI, and please correct me if you think, like, I'd love your opinion on this, but I think we have quite a few years before we have to worry about them like replacing software engineers and things like that, just because um you still need to understand like the full data architecture of something and how you're building something, because like I said, you can't just give it a giant prompt and be like, all right, build me this marketplace. It's not going to compile, and if you don't know how to already code, you're not going to be able to fix any of the output that it returns you. So I think like how do you think we're pretty far away from like being able to do like huge iteration of jobs and tasks, or is that where the agentic workflows come in and that
I
could
think the
break?
agentic workflows are going to help. I think, but that doesn't change my so both basically. I think that it's going to be we're moving towards a place where it's significantly more possible to build large code bases with fully autonomous AI, right? So things like, your RAG-based workflows, retrieval augmented generation, the ability to, okay, we'll break down parts of the code so that we can, go and access the relevant portions when we need to. We can, because the context window is usually not big enough to fit an entire code base in, so you have to figure out ways of improving that. And then you can do things like, you can have a draft, you can have a PR agent, which is basically just saying, hey, this isn't good, this is good, whatever. You could have an agent that does things like that has tools available to it, like sees if things will compile and can test if things will compile, get back artifacts. So, with Elixir, you can access some of the code stuff. I think that we're getting to a point where if you wanted to build something that did stuff, you probably could. At the same time, I don't think that it's going to replace humans for a good while yet. And I've been kind of beating this drum at Amplified for a long time. We had a lot of patent searchers that were worried that AI was going to take their jobs and all of this stuff. And it's, you know, you see it in a bunch of different forms. It's people saying, oh, well, AI is not going to take your job, but somebody using AI is going to take your job. And I think that's probably the direction we're going.
Right, I agree because it's a tool, and I always tell people like AI is great for like helping you solve problems or like rubber ducking off of, but if you don't have like the a good bad code smell and you can't say no, this is wrong, we can't go that direction, you're not
Yep.
going to be very successful using it as a tool. Like you still have to know the fundamentals of whatever programming language you're using to build a product, right?
Absolutely. I'll come back to Amplified for this is that, one of the things that sorry, I mentioned earlier that we wanted to try to solve this problem of retrieval, right? We wanted to solve this problem of making it difficult to find prior art. And I would say that, we got a good ways there and then learned that you simply can't. And the reason that you can't is that every time you go to search, you have a whole bunch of tacit information in your head. And it's not just about similarity. It's not just like I've defined, this invention, find me relevant prior art. Well, relevant in what way? Relevant is not a 0 1 thing. It's not even a continuum. It's multidimensional. There's different ways of thinking about the similarity. And so what we, where we ended up moving was building really powerful iterative structures that utilize the best of both worlds, right? So you can sort based on the AI's determination of similarity, right? Just vector-based similarity between these documents. But then you can do things like you can include keywords, you can include really, your old school queries, you can include all sorts of things to filter. And then on top of that, you can go and you can look at a two-dimensional map where we actually plot the vector representations down into 2 dimensions and see the similarity in 2 dimensions rather than the single similarity dimension of a list, right? And giving those tools to the patent searchers has been extremely powerful. They're able to iterate through and to change what they're doing, to zoom in really far and then choose things that they think are relevant. And then we take into consideration that relevance, and then they zoom back out to the whole set, and all of a sudden it's sorted in a different way where they're finding things that they wouldn't have been able to find with the filters that they were putting on before. And I think that it's a very similar kind of thing with AI and the that kind of, finding good workflows, finding good ways of interacting with this system that can empower you to do your job better, rather than replacing you.
Yeah. Well, like I use AI a little bit if I'm like writing a database query or something that I'm not super familiar with, and I'll like be hacking my way through and I just need a little bit of fine tuning done to it. So like AI is great at helping with like small tasks, right? And I love
Yep.
like I've been using Cursor a lot as my IDE, and I love the autocomplete. Like especially if you're doing like a
Yeah.
massive refactor, you just like that tab button and it catches on pretty quick. And
Yep.
so like those little things, like quality of life things with it, are really nice.
I agree. Best autocomplete, really.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I
Yeah.
don't want it writing the whole thing, but it tends to know if I've got a pattern going on and I don't want to have to type it out a whole bunch of times, or, I've just changed something up in at the top of the file, and all of a sudden I want to go make the change below to accommodate that. Yeah, it's excellent autocomplete.
Yeah, and I no longer
Um,
have to remember all my shortcut keys to highlight the same thing on multiple lines, and I just
yeah,
thank you AI, thank you Claude.
yeah. Yeah, no, I agree. I think it's really good for that. I think it's really good for, it's a better version of like, TLDR on the command line, like, oh, I can't remember how to do this particular thing with said or what have you.
Hmm.
Um, really good for that. And then I think so the very small things, and then I think some of the big things it can actually be really good with as well, where you're as you said, kind of like uh, doing brainstorming, stuff like that. I find it to be a really good rubber duck for stuff like that. I find it really good um, as like a sanity check in a lot of
Hmm.
ways, particularly if you're using something that has access to the internet, right? So
Right.
like Perplexity or what have you. Um, there's a lot of like, hey, is this a reasonable way of going at this? Is this a sane way of going at this? And yeah, I think you get pretty good responses with that sort of stuff. But
Yeah.
then it's the in the middle stuff that's problematic. It's the real rubber
Yeah,
to
where it'll
road
be hit or miss,
architecture.
right? Yeah.
Yeah,
And like what's nice, like especially like in the world of remote work, rubber ducking with it is nice because you don't really have, another software engineer sitting over your shoulder that you can like bounce ideas off of and be like, then you're like, oh, I was staring at a simpler solution this whole time and I just discovered it talking with a fake person.
no, exactly. And I think that, the act of writing, the act of telling someone, right? Like that's why rubber ducking is so powerful. Very frequently, you rubber duck with someone, you know,
Hmm.
you come to your answer.
You solve your
And so I
own
think
answer usually, right? Just starting to
exactly.
talk about your problem.
Exactly. And I think that this is also where it comes down to the expertise and trust. I think that if you're rubber ducking and you're trusting what's coming back, um, you're going to often make mistakes. So
Yeah.
it just gets things wildly wrong sometimes. You give it, you say, "Oh, I'm getting this error. I don't know why I'm like, what's going on here?" Which, by the way, Stack Trace it's excellent at that. But yeah, you get some nonsense back sometimes, and you
Hmm.
really need to have the code smell issue.
Yes.
You need to be able to sniff what's going on, and then it's really powerful. But I guess it's the same thing. How much do you trust your colleague?
Yeah. Well, just enough to get your brain moving, right? You got to have it flow.
Exactly.
But like, yeah, I'll use it a lot to write unit tests for a lot of my code. And
Okay.
and it's nice cuz it kind of helps me kind of it gets most of the use cases that I want to think of, but it also gets my brain going like, oh, and now I'm missing this use case and this use case. And then I don't have to write all these unit tests over and over. And, they pass, I don't 60% of the time, but but it gives you a good starting point, at least with writing
Yeah,
your edge cases.
I think that makes a lot of sense. The advice is often, to say, write your tests and then have the AI do the
Yeah.
implementation rather than the other way
Yeah.
around. But I think that what you're saying about thinking of the edge cases, thinking of the potential inputs and all that kind of stuff, I think it ends up helping you out a lot there.
I have a big problem. I actually need to start doing more test-driven development because the planning is what helps you write better code. And I actually just had a conversation with a colleague of mine, and he was like, just write down what you're going to do before you start writing code. Because like I'll have my problem where I like am so excited to fix a problem or write a feature, I just like dive in and
Yeah.
start writing code. And like I always end up at a really good solution, but it's probably taking me a little bit longer because I jumped into writing code too quickly. So like put in a little bit of planning by like writing tests first, um, writing down your approach to the problem before actually writing code
Yeah.
is it's a problem that I'm working on.
I'm super guilty. I think a lot of folks are. I think I like to say that or blame it on my past as a data scientist, and that it was, everything was iterative, everything was very like REPL driven development. You just try it till it works, and then
Hmm.
it's often throwaway stuff anyway. And so keeping that, trying to change that mindset when I'm, doing more crafting, as opposed to just like bashing out a problem. It's tough, and I'm definitely guilty as well. I
Yeah.
have a lot of respect for people who can think clearly and sit down and really hammer it out.
Yeah, they're like the Jedis of software developers.
Mhm.
Like and like when
Absolutely.
when shit just blows up too, and they stay calm and they're like, it's okay. They throw a little laugh in there, and they're like, this is
Oh
how we'll
yeah,
approach this.
that's my one of my colleagues, Simon. He is just the most even keeled. Everything can be exploding around you, and he is able to just keep just the coolest head, and go and figure out what needs to be done to solve it. And I'm not quite there yet. I panic and run around like a chicken with my head cut off sometimes, but
I'd like to say I'm calm, cool, and collected, but I'm the same way.
yeah. I'm like, why
uh,
isn't this working? I'm freaking out. And it's like, oh, well, you've just typed it all wrong because you wrote it in a panic, and you know, you're
exactly.
the and the thing is still down, and yeah.
Yeah. A lot of like early on projects before you start getting like your CI and CD implementation. So you're doing like a lot of manual deploys. I've had so
Mhm.
many panic moments where I've just like taken down my entire server and I'm like, what? And then you
Yeah.
like panic and it takes you an extra 10 minutes because you just aren't thinking. You're just like panicking and banging on your
Yeah.
keyboard, you know?
Yeah, no, exactly. Or you do something, something silly, like, you take down something that, takes 15 minutes to get back up, and you didn't actually need to take it down, and you could have fixed it while it was live, and yeah, all that
I've
stuff.
done like I always like to use like Docker containers and things, and
Mm.
I've done the kill all way too many times when I didn't need to. And I'm like, why
Yeah,
did I
yeah.
just do that? Because now I'm gonna sit here and watch this damn thing build for 10 minutes.
Yep. Just with great power comes great responsibility, and I'm just sitting there just wiping stuff out.
Right? Like, okay, I'm gonna drop my database. It's cool. I have a backup.
When was the last time you tested your backup, right? Like,
It's true. Like I have a bunch of side projects and I have pretty good automations in place that, just do my backups to S3. But like, yeah, it's true.
Mhm.
Like when was the last time I grabbed one of my database dumps and used it? It's been a
I
while.
had a I had a situation a few months back, actually, where Elasticsearch had decided to choke on its snapshots, and I lost, like, I don't know, like a good 2 weeks
Oh,
of
damn.
ETL updates. And I mean, fortunately, ETL updates, like, I can ram them through within a few hours if I really need to. But that was a very stressful time, to say the least.
Yeah, that sounds horrible. I had a buddy that he kind of understands databases, but he's more of like a CAD engineer, right? Like,
Okay.
so he does like automations for like engineering drawing programs. And
Mhm.
they were, they had a sales guy who was using a pirated version of some Microsoft product. And well, he brought in a Trojan into their company and it sat on their servers just long enough that it was on every single backup. So like they kept like
Oh.
30 or 60 days of backed up data, right? And it went live and it was like what is it when a pay us or else. What is that called? A ransom.
Yeah.
A ransom Trojan. And so all their data was corrupted and it ended up being a huge
Ugh.
nightmare to rebuild it. But
Yeah, I
like,
bet.
yeah, stuff like that, worst nightmares ever. Like, and it's all like because some sales guy pirated software when you probably should have just gave him the Microsoft suite because he's your sales guy.
Yeah.
Yeah,
This is the knock-on effects of trying to save money, right?
right.
You end up spending a lot more.
Yep. Yeah. So it took them down for like weeks too,
Oh,
and like,
that's a very long time. That's
yeah,
painful.
yep.
Okay. I haven't quite hit that level of pain yet.
I don't think I'd be
I
able
was
to
panicking
sleep.
one time. Yeah, no, it would be weeks of no sleep. I'd be up. I mean, small startup, and I'm the CTO and founder. Like, I wouldn't be sleeping
I'd be
regardless, right?
manually entering database records in, honestly, like if I didn't know what else
Yeah,
to do.
yeah, I think so. Just how fast can I type?
Yeah. Oh man. But so what even brought you into the space of patents and amplified? I said it right this time. I
Yeah,
don't know why amplitude keeps sticking in my head, but
amplitude's a thing, and I think amplitude is also an IO. So I think you got a two for one there.
I'm gonna
Um,
look it up right now just to see why are they in my head.
nah, it's yeah, go for it.
But yeah, what brought you into the space?
So I mean, it was mostly the research for my PhD, right? So,
Okay.
um, yeah, I kind of I moved in this direction towards climate policy, and just was increasingly geeking out. I actually did a history undergraduate, wasn't quantitative, didn't do a lot of computer stuff. Then ended up doing in the UK you do 1 year masters, so I wasn't going crazy, but I ended up doing two masters, two 1 year masters, and the first one was in sustainability and transport, and in doing that I did an economics dissertation and learned a bunch of R, and really actually enjoyed it. I jumped onto the R train right when Hadley Wickham was like super active and was making things a lot more functional. So I kind of
Okay.
had this like functional approach to statistical computing and a programming approach rather than using something like Stata,
Mm.
or SPSS or whatever. It was actual programming. And I just kind of ended up running with it. I really enjoyed it. Did another master's in environmental economics and energy economics at UCL. Stuck around there and did a started a PhD. I dropped out to do the startup, so don't take the impression that I actually have a PhD.
Oh wow, I was
Um,
gonna call you doctor and I can't now.
oh
No.
yeah,
No.
you can anyway if you want to. It's not illegal here. I think it's Germany. It's against the law.
Oh
Um,
wild.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But yeah, so I kind of just went in this direction of becoming more technical, working on econometrics in particular, and was really interested in the ways that understanding effectively the social cost of particular approaches to environmental problems. So, I was really influenced by there's an economist at he's at MIT, I think, or Harvard. No, he's at MIT, Darren Acemoglu, um, who did a bunch of work on basically the social efficiency, the social cost of energy transitions and environmental shifts from clean to dirty technology or dirty to clean technologies, because when you make those shifts, when you make policy choices to try to reduce carbon emissions or whatever you want to do to improve the environment, there are what distributive costs. So it can actually be really regressive.
I was
So
gonna
the
say a
poorest are the
lot
ones who are
of
hardest hit.
Yeah, a lot of policies can end up being detrimental because they'll force things before we're even like technologically prepared for it or ready.
Yeah, and so there's that's the other aspect of it, right? Is the balance of how do you try to induce technology? How do you induce investment? Because when we talk about technology from an economics perspective, we're talking about something that is it's a product of spending. It's a product of how much effort and time and money that we're putting into it. It's an imperfect relationship, but we have a pretty good idea, of okay, we spend so much, but there's a bunch of stuff that goes with it, a bunch of dynamics that go with it. So, when I was talking earlier about trying to hide the invention, one of the things that ends up affecting is what we call spillovers, where if you have a new technology, you have patenting inventions, there's a value that comes to society from having made that public because there's investment in that technology. It creates a new kind of direction for technology. Um, and so different policy interventions, they have different outcomes when it comes to technological change, right? And the investment in particular technologies. And so I really wanted to understand that because it's one thing to just count how many patents you have, or to, the holy grail is to try to get spending on the actual investment, but companies tend to not give that up, or you have to get specialized access to get that information. Um, but it's another thing entirely to understand, okay, this direction is starting to grow more quickly than this direction. And when you can see that, you can take that into consideration and start to understand how that technology may play out in terms of like the distributive effects, the network effects, all of these different things. You can start to understand the transition costs in a better way, and you know that, like, you can start to get a better understanding of the cost and benefit, right? So how fast is this going to transition us? Is it going to cost more to society than the actual increase in emissions, or than the decrease in emissions might give us? It allows you to really focus and to make better and more informed decisions from a policy perspective. So yeah, that was kind of my interest there, and it ended up growing into all sorts.
Yeah, that's really cool. I'm curious, like, do you start to notice like industry trends from how people are using your platform before they start popping up?
Um, No. And the reason for that is that we tend to be very, very, very careful about user data. This is some of the most sensitive data that these companies have.
Hmm.
So we have it's basically the data, and particularly like the things that they're searching for and the things that they're trying to understand. We keep as much under a lock and key as possible, and it's very much under like a minimum access, even for me, right? Like I'm just not
That makes
able to
sense.
look at what they're doing. Yeah.
Yeah, it's always like the when you enter certain like startups and businesses, you know how serious they are about security, whether developers have access to prod or not.
Yeah,
Because
exactly.
it's a sensitive fence to walk on, right? Because it makes your life as a developer a lot harder if you can't
Mhm.
troubleshoot with some production queries and things like that. But also, you have to worry about all your users and clients' sensitive data.
Exactly. So, for us, we're ISO 27001 certified. And the main thing with that and getting that certification was just creating a process for it, right? So the default is we don't access it, but we have a process whereby we can, if we need to, just in response to particular situations, right?
Mhm.
So yeah, it's just, again, process, writing things down, kind of like at the beginning of coding, which I should do more of.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad that I'm not the only one that doesn't do it.
Yeah.
It's like you were saying, like I always I write my tests second, and it's like, dude, why? Don't do that. Like every like test driven
I mean,
development's amazing, right? The when like in concept and theory, and I'm like always very impressed by people that can do it consistently. But
yeah.
I struggle. I try, like I'll try, and then I'm like, I just want to write code.
Yeah, I think for me as well. So it's happened with Explorer, and it's kind of happening now with this library. The thing, you know, that I get hung up on is the intuitiveness of an API and how easy it is to use. And so, I'm doing a lot of like I'm implementing things and trying to get from 0 to 1 in that initial level of value, and then I'm just playing around with it and trying to refactor and change things and all of this stuff. And I'm sure that the test driven development people out there will be going, "Oh, you absolutely can do this with test driven development," but like I am not good enough at it to do that. And so when I'm writing and rewriting and trying to find these comfortable points, I'm doing that without tests, right? Like
Hmm.
maybe I have some tests, right? I've got some integration tests or some like high level things going on. But I'm just doing a lot of debug, print debugging and looking at what I've got.
Dude, I'm really bad at not using the built-in like debugging tools and modules, and I'll just be an IO puts guy
Yeah,
and
yeah, yeah. No,
inspect structs and things, and that's how I that's how I function. But it's just quicker
I've
for
started to
me.
do. Yeah, I've started to do a lot of the same just with the built-in debug. I realized that I had been missing out on a lot in life when I started having doing pry on debug calls,
Mm,
and actually being able to get into IEX and look at the environment and see what the state of things is. I was like,
yeah.
I don't have
It
to. I
is
can actually just go in and interrogate it.
it is really nice when you use it. And then like I always
Yeah,
like revert back to just line
I know.
outputs.
I found it's particularly useful for me with Phoenix, right? And with live view, and some of our views are really big, and I know
Mm,
that there's some good tools out there now, some like browser-based tools. I saw one just recently. I can't remember what it was called actually, that had like really good introspection on the current state of things. But yeah, just doing pry with debug,
yeah.
when particularly like in like a really deeply nested leaf of my component tree, it's my whole world changed.
Yeah, that's awesome. So like on the day to day, I'm just a back end engineer, and at our Elixir meetup, we usually have like someone demoing things, right? They'll do
Mhm.
something Elixir related. And one of the talks this time, he built like just a simple Gen server live view like poker app and kind of walked through it. But he
Cool.
implemented live view tests, and I've never seen live view tests before because I don't do much of it,
Okay.
and it was cool to see how simple writing like just front end tests are.
Yeah, it's nice. It's a really nice way to do that. As someone who has played with, JavaScript front ends and dealt with like Jest and all of that stuff, I find it a breath of fresh air to do that with LiveView.
Yeah, we have someone is wants us to give them a shout out because they think this is a pre-recorded stream, but it's not. There's the chat. I just popped it up on my face. So what's up,
Sweet.
LOB Tech? um, oh, we got another Chris in the comments wondering if Christopher has thoughts on projects like Beaver and the future of MLIR in the Elixir ecosystem.
Okay, so Paolo would have been a better person to talk about this. MLIR, I believe that is the default for the EXLA now. So I could be mistaken about that, but I'm pretty sure MLIR as a compiler and backend is the default for EXLA, or sorry, as a compiler rather.
Okay.
So yeah, so
Can you like for us simple folks just briefly explain what it is?
I'm very much a simple folk when it comes to this stuff as well, but it's basically intermediate representations, and it's kind of how uh, NX works and how NX is able to do what what it does. But effectively, it's multi-step, multi-stage compilation. And there are a number of kind of implementations of the kind of sort of the mid-level to byte level encoding or compilation steps that happen. There's a number of implementations. So there was XLA, there's MLIR, and they all they sit in different places. So I'm kind of glossing over some of the technical relationships, or technical differences, partly because I'm trying to hold a lot of this stuff in my head at once and forget most of it. Um,
I forget
but
everything, and then I
yeah,
have to just like read documentation again and be like, oh yeah, like
yeah,
that's
no,
just my
exactly.
life, you know?
But yeah, it's basically so you've got a subset, a subset of Elixir in def-n, in NX, and gets converted into an AST. And that AST is then passed along to MLIR, which then produces an intermediate representation of it, compiles it to an intermediate representation of it that can then be compiled to particular targets. So it can be compiled to CPU code, GPU code,
Okay.
different types of code there. So yeah.
Yeah, well, dude, when I had Paulo on talking, like when he got like I mean, he still stayed like, up here with me, but like you could tell like he could go really deep into all the machine code and like, yeah.
He's one of the most brilliant people I know. I'm constantly flabbergasted at the work that he does and the ideas that he has. He's just and really nice guy on top of it.
Yeah,
It definitely
super
helps.
nice. And actually like pretty good at breaking down the complexity of the things he works on to just like have a
Yeah.
conversation with me because like I don't know. Like it's wild, but like yeah, super cool guy for sure.
No, I think he's a great communicator as well, for sure.
Yeah. Which you always hear about, really smart, especially in the software world. You always hear about those antisocial people. And honestly, I feel like it's rarer and rarer because I have a lot of really smart people on that can just talk for an hour and a half and I just have to sit here and nod. It makes my job so easy.
You know what? The talking in other areas of my life is considered the antisocial behavior. It just so happens that it does well when we sit in a room and chat back and forth, and I'm expected to be on air. I think it's why I like to go and talk at the conferences as well. Just get
Yeah.
up and talk at people for an hour. Um, no, yeah, no, I agree. I think there's something particularly special with the Elixir community. I think there's a lot of people who are kind of on the curve, the beginner mastery curve. I think that a lot of people end up on the mastery side coming around to Elixir. At least
Mm.
that's what I like to believe. Um, it's simple and it's really, really powerful.
Well, we've had our nightmares enough. Like I spent like 8 years with like Node and Express, and then when you find Elixir and the power of Beam, you're like, my life has changed.
Yeah, no, exactly. For me, R and then a lot of Python. And I really don't like Python.
Well, like I know I probably sound I've like written Python, but like for super small things, like mostly just playing around. So I can't really speak to that. But I've always said if I started with a functional language, an immutable language, I think programming would have been a lot easier for me.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Immutable data is like, I first encountered it with Clojure actually, um, and was just like, oh, okay, this is the way that it works, right? And particularly coming from a data background, um, I was like, oh, well, data is we're just passing one piece of data through some functions, and data science is just passing one piece of data through some functions and getting something out the other end, right?
Yeah.
Um, And it's a lot easier to do that when you don't have to worry about some mutation happening along the way that you weren't expecting. I still,
Some singleton holding state somewhere that a million functions can interact with.
uh-huh. No,
Uh,
exactly.
oh, dude, I just remember. So like when I first started, I was just like an iOS developer, and when you struggle, well, one, you are struggling with the idea of object-oriented programming. And then I
Mhm.
feel like you learn to improperly use singletons and singleton patterns and things like
Yep.
that. And then you start learning what race conditions are. Like you have this, like you slowly build of things not to do, right? Like
Yeah,
you,
yeah, yeah.
what is the Dunning-Kruger curve when you're at the top of Mount Stupid and you think you know everything, and then you
Yeah.
slowly start finding all these things you've been doing wrong over and over. But I
I
feel
feel like
like,
that's my whole life.
right. Yeah, same. But like you slowly, I feel like you would really cut that down in an immutable language because it prevents you from creating bad patterns.
Yeah, no, I think so. I think what was it? Jose's talk from ElixirConf EU
His patterns
on
one, it's
exactly.
so good. Like if anyone
It's
has not watched that, I can't recommend. Like that is one of the best talks.
it
Um,
was fantastic. Yeah.
yeah.
And that's just, I think that's exactly it, right? Like I think Elixir, I mean, number one, at the end of the day, it's a pretty small language, comparatively. It's
Hmm.
got the power of OTP. It's got some very clear, some very clear mechanisms, some very clear ways of doing things, and yeah, I don't know. I feel like the primitives that we have and things like behaviors and protocols, they solve a lot of problems without the need to do these kind of to do patterns necessarily. They're
Hmm.
just there. They're ready to go. Yeah, it's technically implementing a pattern, right? But you don't need this whole like song and dance of I'm going to do this sort of pattern or I'm going to do this sort of pattern or what have you. It's just there. It's just you're ready to go.
Daniel Bergholtz just said Christopher is looking like a villain from a James Bond movie.
Oh yeah, no. I went to Melbourne over Christmas, and my wife was like, you gotta lean into the Melbourne vibes and
You
do the
need to.
mustache because
Hey,
I
dude,
just
I love the stash. That's
oh
hilarious.
thanks. Yeah, I shaved it off and I'm just pushing it now. I'm just seeing how
Yeah,
long I can get away with it,
there you
It's been a
go.
couple of months now and I haven't gotten yelled at properly yet, but I'm glad that I got called out on the internet for looking like a Bond villain.
Yeah, I love it. You gotta like freshly like bick the head too, so it's like shiny,
Oh
and
yeah,
then
I'm not fresh. Sorry. I apologize. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
or
No,
like
super, super shiny and just and buff it, you know?
yeah, maybe like Austin Powers, get a white cat, and
Okay. I've got a
yeah,
black and white cat.
that could
I mean,
work. It
he's
could
not,
work.
yeah.
Oh man, that's
I'll
funny.
shave him.
Now that distracted me from what we were actually talking about, but
I think
um,
this is significantly more important.
uh, absolutely, absolutely. To be called a Bond villain, like it doesn't get better than that.
I mean, let's see, this isn't particularly Bond villainy, but I'll try to
I
take
you
the,
like honestly, you're wearing too light of colors. You got to like get more black on. You need like a
I
darker
know,
background.
I know, this is like, yeah, just flip the lights off in here.
We'll work on it. Maybe like when I have you on again, we'll have to work on your
Yeah,
environment.
yeah. It's it's really funny. I'm at a co-working space, and the guys that I work with this is like their podcast room, and it's actually set up like there's like mics and there's cameras and all that stuff. And I didn't catch them in time to be like, hey, can you set me up for a live stream? Because I can do it. Like there's like lights and all
Oh,
sorts of
nice.
stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, do this again and I'll make it real pretty. I'll get some purple lights. We can, vibe and match and
Yeah, perfect.
yeah.
Well, you're gonna need like red or something, for
Yeah,
the.
it's got to be red. I mean, maybe I can just throw up a green screen and emulate some flames or something.
Yeah, you need something evil, and hope
Yeah.
we can. If you get this a little bushier, we get some wax
Oh, I
on it,
can.
maybe.
Yeah, let's get it
Ooh,
out here.
yeah.
hmm
There we go.
I don't know that that would capture the Melbourne vibes that my wife
Yeah,
said
you're
it
kind of
would
getting
with
outside of
this.
that the surfer mode at that point.
A little bit.
Uh,
You know, avant-garde.
that's funny. My brother-in-law is Australian, and so him and my sister live in Adelaide. So
Cool.
I get to get out that way a little bit.
Yeah, it's a beautiful part of the world. South Australia, the beaches in South Australia and just like right there near the city in Adelaide are fantastic.
Yeah,
You've
yeah.
got the hills right there. It's a pretty wonderful place.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. But they always come here because they want to ski. It's either,
Yeah.
uh, Jackson Hole down here in Utah or Japan. Those are their choices.
I say like, there is some skiing in Australia, which people are surprised about, but it's not
It is it. So like, yeah, they do get snow,
mhm.
and it's basically like wet, sloppy spring snow, but they have it.
Yeah. But like so up in the mountains in Victoria in particular,
Hmm.
there's some ski resorts and stuff. There's like what is it, Mount Hawthorne, Hotham, Mount Hotham, and there's Mount Buffalo and a couple of those. And
Nice.
some of it's pretty good. There's a pretty decent season. It's high enough. People are always surprised. And there's like,
I
big
know it
snowy
is. Well, because they
mountains
just think of
in
Australia
Australia,
being hot, right? But
which for the most part it is.
well,
But yeah.
where everyone lives, it is, right? And then,
Mhm.
get out in the outback, you have desert and mountains and altitude.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, there's some beautiful spots. There's this kind of like there's the eastern, they actually call them the Alps, as do the Kiwis in New Zealand. They have their own Alps as well, but yeah, the chain that goes up in Victoria is pretty good. It's pretty good. Went up with my kiddo and did some sledding,
Oh,
which was
nice.
really fun. Yeah,
That's awesome. I think I'm incredibly spoiled where I'm from right now
yeah,
because like I grew up in the Midwest and I don't think I'll ever ski in the Midwest or East Coast ever again in the US. Like it's not worth it.
yeah. I bet.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I've not ever been a real skiing guy. Maybe it's because I grew up in Florida, um, and just spent a lot of time, at the beach. But yeah, it's very flat in
Yeah.
a lot of these places,
I have
and
another sister that lives in Florida as well, and
oh, really?
she would probably join you with that. She does not like vacationing to cold climates. I don't understand it.
Oh no, I love vacationing to cold climates. In fact,
Oh,
like
good.
I love cold climates generally. There's a reason I'm not in Florida. I was just peace, I was got out as quick as I could. Um, so I like the cold. I like the cold. I just I haven't ever really situated myself somewhere where I've got a lot of time to go and ski.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a problem. I discovered the mountains in like my early 30s and now I don't want to live anywhere else. And I used to think
Yeah.
I was like in Southern California. I was like, "Oh yeah, I'm never going to live anywhere else. Like 70 degrees every day of the year. Like
Yeah.
why would I want anything else?" And then I found the mountains and now I don't want to go anywhere.
Seasons seasons are a wonderful thing. I
They
think
really
that's,
are.
it's been one of the big things moving to the Netherlands from being in Australia for a while is getting back here and seeing the leaves turn, getting some snow sometimes, getting,
Do you just take advantage
actually
of living wherever you want just for because you can, or are there reasons that you're in
yeah.
Netherlands and Australia?
It's a long story.
Uh,
A little bit of both. I have the freedom of working remotely, but yeah, kind of, but also don't want to, be moving around my kiddo too much and all that stuff. So,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah, it's hard to move kids around, especially once they're in school.
yeah, no, exactly.
Yeah,
But yeah, kind of get to. I have the ability to choose where I want to be, which is pretty great.
yeah, that is nice. That is one nice thing about being a software developer. We
Mhm.
actually have a good question that you might. It's kind of off topic, but like you're a CTO, so you're in charge of probably hiring people and all that good stuff. We have
Hmm?
Carl Lewis. Hey guys, I have a question not regarding to what Chris does, but I believe it's a good question. I'm learning Elixir. I'm loving it. I do have back-end experience with PHP and Node.js, but now I want to work in Elixir. I can't find any jobs for it. Any recommendations?
Hmm. Yeah, this is kind of the perennial problem.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think that we all have kind of tried to figure this out at some point or another. Part of what's going on is I think Elixir makes you really productive, and it means that outfits that run and use Elixir are typically not doing a ton of hiring. They don't need the big kind of swathes of teams, swarms of
Yeah.
people. Make it a little tough. There are some good like niche job boards, and I think being active in the community, it's pretty. I think you'll end up finding people pretty quickly. But yeah, it's compared to juggernauts like Python or JS or what have you, there's just relatively fewer jobs.
Yeah, like so, I mean, if you want my advice, because I basically created my own Elixir work for 4 years until I got, a full-time Elixir job. And you kind of have to like just keep side projects going where you're using Elixir and yeah, get yourself in front of the community because it is a small community. And when you start meeting people and like I don't know, like start a podcast and then you start having CTOs on and people that start really cool companies that are all using Elixir. And then you start those awesome networking connections and you start just meeting people. So just get involved, even if it's just like a local meetup, just know people.
Yeah, I mean the local meetup is how I started to get to know people. It was actually in Melbourne,
Nice.
which the Melbourne Elixir meetup I think is still running. It kind of dropped out during COVID and stuff. Um, yeah, I mean, I wouldn't recommend starting a company so that you can choose your own tech stack, which is kind of where I'm at. It's cart before the horse and all that stuff. But I would definitely echo the get involved in the community. People are really really great. They're really kind. It's you've literally got Jose running around like just an absolute crazy person responding to everything all the
Dude,
time. I don't know how he does it.
Jose
Um,
came on my podcast like episode 12 or 13. Like I barely had an audience and he came on. Like it's pretty cool.
he's just got he makes so much time for people. And then on top of that, he's incredibly productive and actually putting out code and thinking of things. I don't know how he does it. But I would say that energy it's spread through the whole community, right? Like
I
people
agree.
make time for each other.
Yeah.
Um, it's just a really welcoming, really kind place. So that's my best advice is um, get out into the community, like check out the Erlang Ecosystem Foundation, the EEF. Check out, I don't know. There's a whole bunch of stuff. The community has seemed to have moved over to Blue Sky these days. So I think a lot of the community is there. Um, and just find something. Don't worry about looking silly. Don't worry
Yeah.
about making mistakes. We all do. What matters the most is just kind of being involved and sharing what you're doing and talking to people
Yeah,
because you'll find good people.
go watch some of my like first videos I put up on YouTube. Like I won't go back cuz I'm worried to watch them, but they exist and they're out there for everyone. So, but like yeah, everyone makes mistakes and if you learn from them, you're good. But
Yeah.
well, I forgot what I was going to say. It was something along this topic, but it doesn't matter. It'll come to me when when we move on to another
After when you're going,
subject.
yeah, when you're going to bed tonight, you'll
Yeah, I'll be like,
ah
oh, dang it. That was such a
yeah.
good, like, it would have changed everything in that conversation.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Oh, I was gonna say, because I laughed when you said I wouldn't suggest like starting a company just to choose your own tech stack. I most definitely quit my day job too soon And to start, I started like a fitness marketplace and I chose Elixir. And like, cause like once I
Okay.
got my toes wet, I was like, dude, I love Elixir. I don't want to write Swift code anymore. I don't want to write Node.js. And I just quit. And I burned up all my savings trying to bootstrap a startup, but I learned so much.
Hey,
So like, can you put it like, like I learned a lot. I would have spent a lot of money going to like get my master's degree as well. So like, I don't know, balancing act, right?
it is. Yeah. All's well that ends well, right?
Yeah. And I will
Um,
say I did sign up. I was in a master's program for software engineering at one point and I dropped out because all we were using was Java. I was like, I can't do
I
this.
don't blame you. I don't blame you.
Yeah, it was
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
bad. Let's see. Chris has another question. My primary thesis is that Elixir is the future and the world hasn't seen the potential yet. Every facet of NX replaces whole ecosystems and SaaS platforms in other languages. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I mean, I've been I've been trying to spread that gospel for a little while now. And I like Livebook is incredible. There's a whole bunch of stuff that's come out with that that's spectacular. I think one of the frustrating things about NX is the timing that it kind of that yeah, the timing of it was challenging. So it's incredibly powerful. It's so useful. And it came out right at the time when people were starting to move away from training their own machine learning models and starting to use LLMs. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't use it for LLMs. You can, like Bumblebee can run, can run Mistral and Llama and all of these things. But just generally, there are enough services out there that in many cases it doesn't make a lot of sense to host your own LLMs these days. Um, and so you have this amazing, massive project that does incredible work as kind of, I think the real big herd of developers just were moving to, I just want value from the model. I just want the LLM to give me a response. I don't care about developing it myself. I don't care about actually training models and doing all of that stuff. That stuff's still there. It's still really, really good. Um, but I think Elixir is the future for the LLM side of things as well. And it's actually, funnily enough, it rhymes with the reason why I went to Elixir in the first place, which was actually to talk to APIs that I was developing in Python. I said I really need something with a really good concurrency model for building
Mm-hmm.
my back end, right? I need to be able to handle all these concurrent calls to different places. Um, and I think that concurrency model is what makes it so powerful for the LLM world. And I think that one of the things, there are a whole bunch of things around adoption and around trying to pull people from adoption. I think one of the things is just the ease of getting started, and then I guess there's two things: is the ease of getting started, and then there's the ceiling, right? With what you can do with these agentic workflows and with LLMs. And I think that as long as Python holds the stranglehold on that, like gets all the mind share there, it's going to be a struggle. And I think that those are the two places that we need to kind of be attacking to try to bring eyes onto Elixir and to show that,
Yeah.
okay, you can do all of these great things. And then I think the other thing is just showing how it fits into the broader ecosystem and why it's so powerful. So it's not just that you've got a great concurrency model. Well, this is partly, it comes from the concurrency model, but it's the ability to do things like, okay, I've got a really great concurrency model. I can go and run these agentic workflows. And those agentic workflows, they can do things like we can add like a post message hook that calls out to PubSub and actually just updates every live view client that's connected really, really simply. We can just have them, we can update progress. We can update the actual results, the intermediate results that are coming in. There's a whole bunch of stuff that becomes, that's readily available when you start realizing and thinking about like this whole ecosystem is just based on processes, and they all can talk to each other and they can all do awesome stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And you link that in and get your imagination going with LLMs and what you can do with agents. I think the sky's the limit, and I think that we're going to be able to do things that people in the Python ecosystem wish that they could do,
Right.
or spend a lot of time and effort trying to replicate.
Yeah. Well, like just like the concurrency alone's what drew my attention too. I was like, I'm building this marketplace where I need to stream lots of videos and whatever I'm doing to multiple people, all like working with like Node.js and Express, you start seeing the limitation, and like the only solution in JavaScript world is to throw money at your servers, right? And
Yeah.
that's how you scale. But it's not affordable if you're bootstrapped or barely making money. And
Yeah.
Elixir changes that because you can now have so much efficiency, and then like node clustering and distribution and all that is like so simple compared to other systems.
It is. And things like supervision trees, for example. Like
Yeah.
when we talk about agents, I've been talking about this message passing and stuff like that. But how about running fleets of agents, or having agents, having agents that send messages when they shut down or when they crash, or ones that can restart and come back from the state that they had before. Um, you know, you can do these much more powerful things and have these much more powerful workflows by taking advantage of the OTP primitives. And there's just nowhere else. I mean, aside from Erlang and Gleam and places like that have access to these amazing primitives. And I think that when you have a what we have right now, I think is what everyone who was around at the time of like the dot-com boom, or they were around at the time of like the social media boom, all these sorts of things, they were like, how do I get in on the ground floor? It's like we're at the ground floor right now. We don't know what the best ways of interacting with LLMs are yet. We've got
Hmm.
all these different things, and we're just in this massive experimentation phase. We're in a phase where, yeah, there's a ton of money. There's already starting to be some pullback and pushback to that, because people are throwing LLMs at things because it's a buzzword and all that stuff.
It's a good way to
Um,
get funding.
yeah, it's a great way to get funding, especially when it's not I have a good solution to, it's like I have a solution, and therefore show me problems, as opposed to I have a problem and I
It's kind of like NFTs, but with just throw a LLM on their AI word, like, and
yeah, no,
then
exactly.
yeah,
And I think that as we start to really see the direction that this is going, and I just think it's going in a natural direction where the technology makes sense. It meshes up really beautifully with what OTP does. And I think that's that can potentially be a once in a generation kind of opportunity.
uh,
um it's a technology that was developed specifically for telephony, right?
hmm.
um and I don't know if there's been a clearer fit since then, right? Like, agents make a ton of sense as gen servers.
And I also think people really like, I mean, I don't think we overlook that, but like you brought up supervision trees, like the power of not taking down your whole system if you have a process crash on you, right? And
Yeah,
like, yeah, a piece of your app might break, but your entire app is not breaking. And then it can reboot and fix itself. And it's like self-repairing. And people don't understand like the power of fault tolerance right there.
absolutely. And having a supervisor that can do something when its child dies, right? Like, you
Hmm.
can, if let's say you have other agents, right? You can send them all a message. You say, hey, this one died, chill out.
Yep.
Like,
Yep.
you've got stuff that you can, you've got the like obvious, the things that map from the things that you're trying to achieve to the actual code, and to the telling the computer what to do. And when you've got that, such a clear one-to-one mapping between those two things, I think the sky's really the limit.
I agree. All right. We have a couple questions that are kind of related. We'll kind of try to group them
Okay.
up. Basically, how do we show potential to the world, building SaaS that are highly scalable, recording tutorials, showing the performance. And then another one is like, how do we like show our workplace that this is a good move and scalability? And I think, writing blog posts, showing performance increases, answering the whys, right? Because I think tech, we have our echo chambers, right? And everyone wants to go with the most popular solution, and the most popular solution isn't always the right solution, but that's what people will assume. And so I think we're in these bubbles, and that's why people choose bad tech stacks, is because, well, everyone else is using it, so it must be good.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I don't know. Elixir
Yeah.
isn't as popular, but I also think we don't want it to be super popular. I don't know. I think not super popular too quickly. I think we might be moving a little too slow, but at the same time, do we want to be like as crazy as like the Rust community? I don't know.
I mean, they're having their own problems right now,
They
but
definitely are.
yeah. I can't really give a good answer for how you convince your employer, because mainly I've been the employer, and I kind
Hmm.
of went from academia into to having a company. So I don't know how to play well with others and all that kind of stuff. But I think the answer to the first question is mostly to solve problems, and then just communicate how you were able to do it. One thing that I kind of see much more frequently than I expected is people who are like people taking Elixir for granted. Elixir developers taking Elixir for granted and being able to solve problems and then not really pausing to reflect how challenging would that have been if I had done it in JavaScript or in Python
Hmm.
or what have you. Um, and then I think the other thing is, when you're solving problems and thinking about the business problems that you're solving, and maybe that speaks to the second one as well. Um, I think it's worth thinking about communicating the uniqueness of the solution, and the openness and the increase in the kind of creativity that you get. I think that this was the biggest thing for me, and something that I'm constantly trying to communicate and often kind of struggle with, is, well, the solution itself ends up being quite simple in Elixir terms. And I think that often discourages people as well. I think people think, well, this was a really simple thing to solve. Why would I go and brag about it on the internet? My Elixir friends aren't going to think it's particularly special, but it's not necessarily them that you're talking to. But I think the thing that I'm constantly trying to get across is just, I can think about solving problems in a much different way. I'm much more creative. I'm much more able to just think with the tools, with the primitives that are available to me. And I think if we can figure out how to communicate that, I think if we're able to communicate, I was able to solve this problem in this way, and I wouldn't have even thought about it if I hadn't been working in Elixir and using OTP and all of that stuff. Um, I think that that's really, really powerful.
Hmm.
And sometimes you just need to have your hands on it to do it. But I think that we can start to communicate that in a more effective way.
Yeah, I agree completely. I mean, just tell your employer to be smarter, and then they'll agree and change the tech stack. No.
I mean, listen, I'll plug myself and say I've got a couple of talks from ElixirConf and from CodeBeam where I've talked about the transition that we made at Amplified and the choice that we made, to drop Python, drop JavaScript, and drop Python. And I mean, we saved a ton of money. We saved a ton of money. I
I
mean, on
believe
the
it.
order of, a good portion of our five digit AWS spend. And more than that, it's the siloing was reduced. We were able to like circle the wagons and consolidate. And I'm just constantly looking at, like, Sasha's table of all the different technologies that you need to make an Erlang.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, and it extends. It's constantly extending, and ETL and AI and ML are all on there now. And I think that having all of those things together just makes teams incredibly efficient. It makes people, what's the Rails thing is the one person framework. And I
Oh
mean, if that's the
yeah,
case, then Phoenix ends up being the half person framework or the part-time framework or
I agree.
whatever.
Yeah, yeah, it's
Um,
wild because I also think it's a great choice for like MVP and prototyping because you can just move so quickly. Like
yeah,
you
no,
really can do
absolutely.
a lot with a one man team.
You can do an incredible amount, and I think that's the another one of the draws. Like you said, it's simple enough and powerful enough that you can get up and running so fast, and you can be incredibly productive as a one person team, but you don't have to then switch technology as you grow and scale. There are paths to scaling and paths to, if you're struggling with performance, you can use things like Rustler, or you've got accelerated baths with NX. You've got all of these different tools that you can lean on and you can distribute. So there's not a ceiling either. It's
Right.
it's you know you're not running into the same kind of problems with concurrency or with performance that you end up with Rails in certain types of projects.
Yeah. Well,
Um,
what's nice too is you can start building an Elixir, not even touch the fancy things, OTP, gen servers, whatever you might be doing, right?
yeah,
You can build things poorly, but as you learn and have to like, tighten on your performance, you're not leaving your ecosystem. You're just doing things better. You're doing refactors. You're throwing a gen server or open worker to do like an async process instead of doing everything synchronously. And so you can learn and grow with your project.
yeah. No, I think that's exactly right, and I think that's such an appealing part of the whole shebang.
Like
It's what makes it fun.
I didn't touch OTP or gen servers for like a year of building my marketplace just because I didn't know. I was like, I don't have time. Like I don't know what I would use them for yet, but I know they're going to
Yeah.
be great in the future. And then when I finally found the need, I learned what a gen server was and how it worked, and it was the most amazing thing in the world. But it's one of those things I tell people not to rush into using gen servers because then they'll turn into your global state and you'll use them wrong and all of that
Yeah.
stuff. But yeah, I feel like it's just like there's so much power under the hood. You can slowly
Mhm.
reveal it as you run into issues.
Absolutely. I mean, 99% of the time you don't need to write a gen server even when you think you
Right.
need to, right? Like
Exactly. Yeah.
most some days I'm like, "Oh, do I get to write a gen server?" I'm like, "No, no, I don't actually
No.
need to write a gen server."
But I want to.
No. I want to
I
because it's so fun.
actually I just did a really fun project. We built like a very small, like multiplayer Peggle game. You drop the ball, it hits pegs. And
Yeah.
I got to play with gen servers. So I made,
Oh,
I have a game state gen server and then individual user state gen servers and then just message passing. And it's like beautiful. And it was so much fun to build. And it was a really good excuse to use gen servers.
I don't like, yeah, I'm super jealous. I like having good reasons. Maybe that's actually why I'm working on agentic workflows in Elixir. I'm just
It
like, it's
totally
just,
is.
just a 100% excuse to work with gen servers.
Yeah, for sure. Um, don't feel obligated to disclose this, but like, how many engineers do you have on your team? Do you have a
I,
relatively
I
small
I
team?
share it all the time. It's tiny. There's two of us.
That's awesome. Very cool.
Yeah,
And
we were bigger, and yeah,
both Elixir devs.
yep,
Okay,
exactly. Yeah,
right
we
on.
had we were bigger and made the switch to live view and had to let a few people go at that time, which was not a nice thing.
It's
But
never fun when you have to let people go, but
no. But and then after that, slowly, over time, over the years, we just kind of had people drop off and do their own thing or what have you, move on, and we've just not needed to go and hire to replace them because we've just been so productive.
mhm.
And so we will probably expand back out relatively soon. We're looking in that direction. And running a company on two devs is exhausting sometimes. but we're very much able to do it, and
Yeah.
with a surprising amount of comfort.
Yeah. I think that's awesome. And that also shows the strength and power of, choosing the Beam VM for
For
your
sure.
stack. Yeah. That's cool.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Nice.
And company in real life production, alive for 7 years. So you made it over the startup hump.
Yeah, we're profitable. Yeah,
Yeah.
profitable on Elixir.
That's
I'm happy
amazing.
with that.
Dude,
Yeah.
if anyone has ever started a business, hitting that profitable line is a huge benchmark.
Yeah, it's definitely a celebratory moment.
For sure. Well, that's very cool. Wow. We've already been going for an hour and 45 minutes.
Yeah.
So I think we can wrap this up. And dude, Christopher, it was awesome having you on. I really appreciate your time. And everyone
Thanks
that
for having
has
me.
been tuning in, and even the non-believers of the live stream, you know.
What do I have to do? Do I have to, should I like go shave the head right now and prove it? I don't
Yeah.
know.
But no, this has been awesome. And always feel free to reach out and come back on if you ever have any updates or anything you want to share, or just if you feel like live streaming and talking about Elixir, let's do it.
Yeah, let's do it. No, it's fun. Fun chatting. So I'm always in for that.
Awesome. All right, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in, and have a good weekend. Testing.